you can get away without missing out. Whether you're traveling across Idaho or just spending more time outside, the Connector keeps you up to date with the local stories that matter, from wildfire season to community news. Stay connected to Idaho with the Connector, Idaho Daily News. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. This is Idaho Matters. Over the past few years, we've heard a lot about the challenges facing boys and young men, whether it's mental health, friendship, academic success, or simply figuring out what it means to grow into a good man. Well, many parents are asking the same question. How do we raise boys who are kind, who are resilient, confident, and they're prepared for the world that they're in today? Well, that's the question at the heart of the book, Building Boys, Raising Great Guys in a World That Misunderstands Males. It combines research, practical advice, and real-life parenting to help families better understand how boys grow, how they learn, and how they thrive. The book is now reaching a new audience with its paperback release. So joining us today is Jennifer Fink. She is the award-winning writer, mother of 4 boys, and author of Building Boys. Jennifer, thank you so much for coming back on the show. It's really good to chat with you again.
I'm so glad to be here with you today, Gemma.
So, as I mentioned, the subtitle of the book is Raising Great Guys in a World That Misunderstands Males. What do you think is the biggest way that our culture misunderstands boys today?
I think there are 2 primary misunderstandings, and I think the first comes in misunderstanding male development. So many people, including most parents, most educators, most people, don't realize that the pace of male development and the pace of female development is different. Yes, children are all individuals, and yes, broadly we get to the same spaces as adults. But for the most part, boys develop their gross motor skills before their fine motor skills. Their language skills tend to develop after females. Their reading, their writing, and these things kind of place boys at a disadvantage in an education system that now expects kids to read and write when they're 5 years old. So I think that's the primary one, the pace of development and the fact that males take longer to mature than girls. And the second one, I have seen a consistent thread. We tend to treat boys more as problems to be managed than as children to be nurtured. And I think that is often very subconscious or unconscious, but it is a thread that has gone through our parenting and our societal interactions with boys for decades now.
You know, I think one of the things that I really appreciate about your work, and as a lot of folks know, I am a mom, I have 2 boys, is that it's not about, blaming boys, right? Or excusing bad behavior, right? It's not this idea of just giving them a pass. As you said, it's about understanding how they develop. So I'm curious, how do you think we got to a place in our society where it feels like talking about the needs of boys feels almost controversial?
Right? I do think that's starting to shift. I think we're in a different place now than we were 3 years ago or 5 years ago. But I think we got here partly because there have been huge inequities. And for a very long time, you know this well, Gemma, I know this, all of our female listeners know this. Like for a long time, the world was pretty predominantly ruled by men. Women didn't earn the right to vote until not that long ago, statistically speaking. Women couldn't get credit cards in their own name. So there were a lot of disadvantages that women and girls faced. And so we as a society put forth a lot of effort to alleviate those disparities, and we have seen significant successes. And at the same time, especially those of us who are female, we know there's still work to be done. There's still plenty to be done. And so there's a fear, I think, that if we look at and pay attention to boys, if we also look around, we still kind of do live in a world where there's more men ruling and in power than women, that will somehow further exacerbate and make a bad situation for women. And the truth is that we do better when we all thrive.
Well, and that's the thing that I have seen, right? Is I completely agree with your statement. Is that I'm a girl. I remember growing up in a culture that was, very much geared towards the success of men and really having to fight, to get where you are.
Yeah.
And yeah, and we still, as you said, have a lot of work to do. Yet at the same time, it feels like we have had to fight to make sure that our boys are seen, as children and not a problem, right? That they
Yes.
have the same emotional needs as girls do. And
Yes.
that's one of the things that you write about is raising emotionally intelligent boys. However, I also think we live in a culture that often sends really mixed messages to boys and to parents on how we parent boys. So what are some of those mixed messages and how we get to the point of understanding that boys are just as emotional as girls and
Right.
we need to allow them to have space for that.
100% agree with what you're saying. These mixed messages are so prevalent, and it makes it hard for parents of boys and really, really difficult for boys. Anybody who has ever spent time with, a 3-year-old boy, a 4-year-old boy, like they are the sweetest, most adorable, emotions everywhere creatures. If they are angry, if they are sad, if they are overjoyed, they are compassionate, all of those things. And so there is this thread, and parents are being told that we need and want our boys to become men who can express their emotions and be vulnerable and talk about their feelings. And at the same time, many of our boys are still in 2026 hearing messages that are boys don't cry, man up,
Mhm.
rub some dirt on it. Every weekend, every day, boys are hearing and engaging in these messages. And so there's this shift where we say we want things to change, but the culture hasn't fully made that change. And our boys and us are trying to navigate that spot. We do want our boys to be able to express their emotions, but we don't want them to be bullied or ostracized in school or on their teams. So that's the line that we're all trying to walk.
And at the same time, one of the things that you talk about in the book is encouraging parents to let boys struggle. And I think this
Yeah.
can be really hard, in particular for moms, right? And let me
Yeah.
just give you like a quick example just that happened in our house the other day. So our oldest is getting ready to go off to college and he just got his roommate assignment yesterday.
Okay.
And
Ooh.
he is in so right. So he's in a suite. So there's like two kids in one room and then there'd be three kids in another. He got in that third with the three kids. And my first reaction was like, "Oh, this isn't okay. We need to change this. Like, that's not going to be good for you. Like, you need your space. You need, time to recharge. And two more people in a room. And I'm like spiraling in my head, right? And
Right.
I'm like, and so I'm trying to tell my son, like, well, you could do that. You could do this. You could. And my husband looks at me and he goes, he can figure it out. And so I just like took a breath, and then later on, I'm like spilling all of this to my husband, and he's like, I'll talk. And he just said, he goes, I'll talk to him, but he goes, you know what? He'll figure it out. And I think, he's 18 years old, and I'm still thinking of like, this isn't okay. You're not going to be able to do this. Where I'm like,
Right.
maybe he will be able to do this. And how big of a deal at the end of the day is this? But I am sitting with this, and I'm sure he probably maybe hasn't given it much more thought. But again,
Right.
what what is that
Right.
difference between the healthy struggle and letting them sink or swim? And to also realize maybe we are, as moms, we think of these as big hurdles and maybe it's not as big of a hurdle.
Right. First of all, a lot of compassion to you, Gemma. This transition of your child going off to college is a tough one. And I'm hearing from so many parents who are struggling with this right now. And part of it is like you have just spent the last 18 years living with this boy, man, child. You know him in some ways, maybe better than he does
Hmm.
himself. He's still figuring himself out. You kind of know which conditions he thrives in, and I know you want him to thrive at college. So you're like, I want to set you up for that from the start. And pull back, the big picture is ultimately he has to figure out what he needs to thrive and how to create those conditions and how he can find ways to facilitate what he needs, even in worlds that, aren't tailored for him, which is part of what he's going to learn at college. But in the moment, that can all get erased by your concern for your child, your desire to help him. I think your husband was absolutely right there. This is not a problem you need to solve for him. Ultimately, it will be better if he solves it, but it can be really hard. And most of us, the way we sort of find these boundaries for ourselves is kind of by reacting. And then maybe we catch ourselves, or maybe our parenting partner or somebody else does. And then we pull back and we think and go, yeah, maybe I should just let him deal with this one.
Yeah, well, and he did say, and then I'm like, well, maybe you should reach out, or here's what you could do if you want to see if maybe you could just be, with one roommate, and I'm telling him, and he goes, Mom, that's just too much work, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm like, all right, okay, like,
right for
that,
him, learning how to live with two other people may be less work than doing the logistics, and who knows,
right,
maybe he'll grow in the regardless, he is going to grow through this process. Maybe he'll learn
right,
to
and
live with two other people.
maybe he will. And another thing that you talk about is that emotional intelligence part, right?
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, this goes for every person, but I think we hear that phrase all the time, emotional intelligence.
Yes.
But what does it actually look like in everyday life when we are looking at our sons?
Ooh. So broadly speaking, emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize and appropriately respond to emotions in yourself and in others. So there's nothing wrong with the emotion of anger, with feeling angry. Angry can be a signal that something has to
Mm-hmm.
change. Of course, yelling at somebody, hitting somebody, lashing out at somebody, that's inappropriate. So, emotional intelligence is just really learning how to recognize emotions and respond to them in yourself and in others. So, what does that look like in practice with our boys? It's all over the place. Because what I just described, I mean, if you're honest with yourself, Gemma, you're probably still working on this too, even as a
Oh,
grown up
yeah.
who's been on this planet for, many decades.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that I've noticed too is, especially as my kids are getting older,
Yeah.
is even my oldest, where, he'll get angry about something, right? Rightfully so. And he kind of like, he'll take it out on me in the sense of like getting frustrated. But I mean, there's even a point where this summer where he's mad about something and he's talking to me about it. And he goes, I don't know why I'm mad at, I'm not really mad at you, but I know I'm acting
Ah,
like I'm mad at you, but I'm not really mad at you, but I'm just, he goes, and I go, and I'm just like, you just need to like get it out. He's like, yeah. And so I just sat there kind of like as a punching bag, but at the same time, realizing that he's understanding that he's upset,
yes.
and I happen to be there as that, I think, safe space for him to kind of verbally vomit.
Yeah.
But he's
Yeah.
recognizing, I mean, is that like, is that part of what we're talking about in emotional intelligence, where they are starting to recognize it? But at the same time, I've always said to my kids, there's no wrong emotion. It is how you deal with that emotion, though.
I think that is such a beautiful example, Gemma, and especially knowing that, he is at this age where he's heading off to college. Some people have heard, that summer before there tends to be
Oh
like
yeah.
a soiling of the nest, right? Where things get a
Hmm.
little rough at home because it's like how they break away and how we like, could you please leave now? So there's both of that. And one thing I noticed as my boys were growing is that there is a lot of growth between, say, 14, 15 and 18. And they do start to have
Hmm.
more self-awareness. So the fact that he didn't entirely get it, but he was starting to realize it's not you. I think this is just me. You are seeing him have that experience and realize that in real time. And he will be
So
able to take that and move forward with it.
yeah, right, and that's the goal. So before we take a break, I want to ask you one more quick question, because you've
Yeah.
spent years interviewing researchers and educators.
Yeah.
Is there a piece of research that changed the way that you parented your own sons?
Ooh, I think it was accumulation and
Mm,
really All of the research eventually comes around to the same point that the biggest thing that boys need to thrive is connection.
Hmm.
Connection. That matters more than all of the other stuff. So we can stress out about their bedtime and we can stress out about screens, or we can focus in on connecting with our son and building and forging and strengthening those connections. And that's where you're going to see the difference.
You mentioned connection, Jennifer. And I think one of the things that a lot of parents worry about is friendships because it seems sometimes that boys have fewer close friendships than girls as they get older. So what can parents do or is there anything they can do to help boys build like those deeper, healthier relationships? Because again, I think this goes back to the fact that girls are socialized at a very young age that friendships are important, that friendships matter. And we learn to navigate relationships, I think, in a way that historically boys have not learned those tools, that skill set.
The research backs you up on this 100%. Judy Chu has done research and shown that as boys get older, they tend to not have as many or as close of friendships, that at younger ages, they will use very loving terms to describe their friendships with boys. And as boys get older, and as they absorb this messaging from our culture that is still very, very prevalent, a man should be strong, he should be self-sufficient, he should not express vulnerability, it makes it much, much harder for boys to have those kinds of close, intimate friendships because so much of boyhood is a competition. It is,
Mm,
can you stand up to your peers? Can you not back down? That's the reality that our boys are inhabiting. So when it comes to supporting boys in their friendships, I think first parents need to understand and respect that tension that our boys are living in. They want to be close and they are navigating this social hierarchy and structure where being too needy or too out there with your emotions is not accepted necessarily. Parents can also
I-
help by modeling and talking about the value of friendships. It makes a big difference if parents have people in their lives that they spend time with. A third thing that I would say is understanding and recognizing and making space for the fact that boys' friendships and men's friendships often do look different than female friendships. There is
mhm.
more side by side doing something together, whether that's shooting hoops or going fishing or video gaming. Video game is a huge way that our boys connect. And they do talk to one another. And if you have ever listened, Gemma, I'm sure you have listened as your boys are playing with friends over the headphones, right?
Hmm.
If
Oh
you've
yeah, they
ever
talk to
listened,
each other.
right? And so sometimes amid the tech talk of, needs to go where and do what in the battle, you'll catch a little snippets where they're talking about something. Don't write off those friendships because those friendships are often deeper than we think, and our boys are pretty good at figuring out who they can and can't trust. Your son doesn't need a lot of friends. He really needs a person, a few people in his life, including parents, including other adults that he can be close with. So
Mm.
those are some of the main things that I would say for parents. And of course, as our boys become teenagers, and I'm sure you know this too, they don't really want us micromanaging too much. They don't want us managing their play dates for
Yeah.
them.
I have to tell you, one of the things that made me get off their cases about video gaming
Yeah,
was me kind of, overhearing them and
right?
realizing that it was like, oh, they're socializing. Like they're playing a game, but actually what they're doing is this is how they socialize. This is how they hang out. And if I take that
Yes.
away from them, or
Yes.
limit that, then I'm limiting their ability to connect. And some people might
Ye-
disagree with that, right? I know there are all kinds of limits on video gaming and all of that, but for my parenting, I realized they are connecting in a way that I didn't realize they were connecting.
You did something so key there. You watched, you listened, you observed. ultimately I had the same exact experience with my boys, and it was back during Fortnite 1.0 when Fortnite
Oh
first
yeah.
came out. I was listening to my youngest son playing with his friends, and I realized there is coordination going on. There's communication,
Hmm.
there's planning. There are these are the skills they talk about them wanting to develop in school, and they're doing it this way. And they are connecting and as friends. And so for me too, that was when I kind of backed off a little bit. Again, all parents, just like you said, you have to make the decision that's right for, your son and your family. But statistics and research show that many boys right now, video gaming is a major source of connection with their peers, and that connection can form deep friendships.
So you mentioned schools, right? And
Hmm.
what we want them to learn in schools. I will say this. When my oldest started kindergarten back in 2013, I felt like there was definitely a battle about um, see wanting teachers not just to see my son, but to see all of these little 5 and 6 year old boys
Yeah.
as 5 and 6 year olds, right? Not
Yep.
these problems. And I'm curious, do you feel or see through research, are schools doing a better job understanding boys than they did a decade ago? I mean, is that shifting? Because also, if you look at elementary schools, the majority of people that run elementary schools
Right.
are women, right? And,
Right.
and
Right.
so there is something to be said about, I think, male influence in schools, which we tend to not start seeing until middle school, high school.
Right. I wish I could tell you that I thought it was getting better. I think it's still very much the same in most places. And partly, what happened over the last 10 years also included the pandemic, which
Hmm.
disrupted learning. And we've all seen stories about, learning losses, et cetera, academic losses. And so schools have been very, very focused on that. I think in a way to a detriment to our boys who very much, especially when they are young, they learn by doing, they learn by experiencing. This whole sit down and we're going to teach you how to read thing is, this is my opinion, one of the best ways to disengage a lot of 5-year-old boys from school. They're like, why? This is not interesting at all. 100% I think that reading ultimately is important, but I think there's a lot of work to be done in schools yet.
You've written a lot about resilience
Yeah.
throughout your book. Is resilience something that we assume the boys just naturally develop over time? Or is it really something that parents have to intentionally teach?
I think it's both. Even if you don't teach or allow opportunities for boys to learn resilience, life will give them plenty of opportunities where they are knocked down
Hmm.
and their option is get up again or don't, right? So life will present opportunities. I think it is better if parents can facilitate and model resilience. So for instance, you know, we talked about struggle earlier. So giving our boys opportunities to struggle a little bit, to fail sometimes, to have things not go their way, and then figure out another option, and maybe that works. And when they do that and they find that competence and self-confidence in themselves, that is the roots of true resilience.
I have to say, my boys kind of roll their eyes at me because they've always heard me say, like, "What's the worst they can say? No." I mean, and I mean, I say it kind of facetiously, but I think that's very true, right? When they are thinking of something or should they try something, I'm like, literally, what's the worst they can say? No. Okay, well, you're going to hear more no's in your life than you're ever going to hear yeses.
Right.
So
So they're
if you
developing it.
right, right. And then I think too, when we look at these mental health statistics for boys and young men, I think that it can be increasingly concerning. And I think the headlines about boys can feel very discouraging. After spending years researching this topic, you also have
Yeah.
personal experience raising 4 sons.
Yeah.
W- Is there anything that gives you optimism about all of this, right? Because I think we can get marred in in all of the negativity versus like we want, I think all of us want to raise really great boys who become wonderful men.
Yes. There is a lot that gives me hope, and a lot of it is looking around at the boys and young men I know, right? And you have
Hmm.
young men in your life, so assuming you know some of their friends. Like, they are some
Absolutely.
incredible humans. They're talented and they're funny. And do they do everything right all the time? No. Guess what? Neither do we. We are
Hmm.
humans. Um, Especially when it comes to boys, the headlines are so negative. And I do think that there is a point in time where we need to pay attention to disparities. Like, hey, boys are falling behind in school. Hey, boys commit suicide like 4 times as often as girls. That's a problem. Let's pay attention. But at the same time, we have to remember that despite the scary headlines, despite things like, mass shootings and, oh, look, it's a guy again, there are so many, many more good men, good guys who are out there in the world providing the counterpoint to that all the time. And we so often don't see them.
I have less than 1 minute left with you. What is one thing that when someone picks up your book, that you hope they take away when they finish that last page?
I think the biggest thing I want is for them to realize that they are not alone. It's not them. It's not their boy, that their lens has been kind of off, and that they can look at their boy with new understanding and new perspective and really just focus on nurturing the child in front of them.
Mm. Well, Jennifer, as always, it is such a pleasure to talk with you, especially as a mom who has done this 4 times over. So just appreciate your perspective and all of the data and research that you bring as well. So thanks for spending time with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We've been talking with Jennifer Fink. She is an award-winning writer, mother of 4 sons, and she's author of the book, Building Boys. It is actually out now in paperback. You've been listening to the Idaho Matters podcast from Boise State Public Radio. To stay in touch, you can find quick Idaho daily news every morning when you subscribe to the Connector podcast. And you can also listen to Boise State Public Radio podcasts, including Idaho Matters, on YouTube.
The fatal shooting of a teenager at a protest in Seattle has gone unsolved for 6 years.
This is open in your face. How are there no answers?
Our investigation has uncovered new evidence and witnesses who say they've never talked to police.
Did police ever call you? Not once.
Listen to We Keep Us Safe, a new true crime series on the Embedded podcast from NPR.